Greetings and thank you for joining us for part 3 of our Act 4 tutorial series. In part 1 of this series we painted Mirror Lake water tiles, and in part 2 we created a silicone mold to add resin water effects to the water tiles. Now in part 3 we will color and pour resin into the water tile using the silicone mold, and once the resin cures we will finalize the piece by adding the foliage. At the end of this video we'll share some ideas we'd like to do in the future. Now that our pieces are painted and the silicone molds are made, we can drop 2 6x6 water tiles into the molds. Make sure to press down the terrain so that it's flush to the bottom of the mold. If your piece is kind of warped, it's not a big deal. Just know the resin might also go underneath your piece. Let's talk about the mold. Chances are the silicone mold will not bow when the resin is poured in. However, if the mold bows, then your pieces are not going to align correctly. So to keep the mold square, let's mount the support tool over the mold like this. Today we are using a 2-part epoxy for restaurant tabletops. It requires us to mix equal parts of A with part B. You will need about 4 fluid ounces of resin for 2 tiles. With that in mind, we're going to color the resin with paint, and it's very important you always use the same amount of resin with the same amount of color. This is about a 9-ounce cup. What we're going to do is add part B to the first line. Then we're going to add part A on top of it and fill to this line. It's true, it's not going to be exactly equal parts. It's going to have a little bit more of part A, which is the hardener side. It's still going to work, and it's going to be easy to measure. For color, we're going to use 2 drops of deep water green and 1 drop of earthstone. So let's give these paints a good shake before we pour the resin, and that is so that the paints will have time to settle and the bubbles will pop inside the container. And next thing we are going to do is make a couple of wicks. This is done as a just in case. Just in case as you're adding color, 1 too many drops may fall in, and having these will quickly wick it out. When you're doing a huge batch of tiles like this, there's a chance that this is going to happen. We did about 60 water tiles, and it happened a few times, and that's why we wanted to share this tip with you. Okay, so let's set those off to the side, but keep them close by. Let's add part B resin side to the cup. And we're going to wipe off the excess resin from the bottle using the middle of the stir stick. Now we can lay the stir stick across the cup. Let's add part A, which is the hardener. Alright, and let's slowly mix the 2 parts together so we can minimize on the bubbles. Mix for about 3 minutes. Now let's add the paints and stir until the color is all mixed in. So when you look in the cup after it's mixed with all the color, you're going to see it looks pretty dark. Don't let that fool you. As we pour this into our tile, the resin is going to spread out and it's going to look a lot less dark. So let's pour it in. A couple things to consider here. First, when adding resin to the tiles, the edges of each tile are the same height. Anything besides the edges may be lower or higher. So add resin to the piece and stay under the shoreline at the edges. This will give you the best results on keeping the water level about the same height across all tiles. Second, most of the time you'll have some resin left over. Don't try to force all of the resin into the tile because the water level will get too high. Third, you're going to use the stir stick to push the resin into the rocks and into the cracks. Fourth, and this might be the most important, when selecting 2 water terrain tiles, pick one with little landmass and the other with mostly landmass, or 2 tiles with medium landmass. This way you'll have enough resin to cover both tiles. Fifth, water tile 16, it doesn't need a mold, so what you can do is when you do have extra resin, pour it into this one. Sooner or later it's going to fill up. Okay, moving on. To get rid of microbubbles, you're going to take a lighter, you're going to breeze over the surface of the resin. The best type of lighter for this is the torch type. Do this about 2 to 3 times, and then we can cover the piece with foil. When covering with foil, make sure you bend the edges in such a way so it doesn't fall into the resin. Now let's let the resin cure for 8 to 16 hours. With the resin mixture ratio we do, we can demold in about 8 hours. But keep in mind the surface will still be sticky enough that if you touch it, you might get your fingerprints in it. And if you do want to touch it, touch the side where nobody will see. And the reason why you would want to demold it 8 hours is so that you can add resin to 6 pieces per day. So if you do it, be careful. After about 24 hours, the piece will be completely cured, assuming you use the same resin as us. We can go ahead and now remove the sharp edges that might have formed where the resin touched the mold. For this, we're going to use Games Workshop Mouldline Remover Tool. Simply drag the tool across the edge of all your pieces. Seems scary to do, but you're going to be alright. Okay, so that's it for the resin part. This next section, flocking and adding foliage, is completely optional, but it will make your terrain look amazing. We will be using Woodland Scenic Earth Blend, Green Blend, Static Grass, a few different types of tufts, and some bushes, and I don't even know what this is called. We got this back in 2015. It's some kind of moss stuff. Anyhow, for the tools, we're going to use a T-push pin and this dentist tool. And we're also going to use this clear gel tacky glue. It dries practically invisible. Let's get started by adding glue to the edges of the rocks, then drop in the bushes. Grab some tufts, break them up, and wedge them into the edges of the rocks on top of the glue. You can even put the tufts on the wet side to create an outcropping area, which is a great way to hide fingerprints if you touched your resin while it was curing. That goes for hiding foil, just in case that fell in while it was drying as well. So just go around your piece until you got the bushes and the tufts the way you like them. Okay, check these bushes out. They have little bally tips on them, but they pretty much instantly fall off, and really you don't get that many bushes for your money. It could be that we got a bad batch, because even the glue pads were super hard, but even so, we do like them. Alright, it's time to get on with the flocking. First, let's put a plain piece of paper under this piece. Then let's apply the glue to some or all the tops of the rocks. Let's grab a second piece of paper, fold it in half, and put some earth blend flocking stuff into it. Now off to the side, we have 3 folded pieces of paper. One has the earth blend, one has green blend, and another has static grass. Now take that same piece of paper with the earth blend and tap it so that the earth blend slides down the center of the fold and onto the glue. It's going to look something like this. Alright, so let's pick up the piece. Let's turn it on a little bit of an angle, start tapping it. And then we're going to turn it completely upside down, continue tapping it, and so that all the loose earth blend will fall off onto the piece of paper beneath it. Let's put this terrain off to the side and take the bottom paper with the excess earth blend and pour it back into the folded paper. So let's do the same thing with green blend, and this time let's expand and target the edges of the rocks, including on the water side and even some of the grass. Let's push down and spread out any piles of glue with the push pin or a dental tool. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the green blend and sprinkle that over the glue, just like before. Then we're going to take the train and tap off the excess green blend so that it falls on the flat piece of paper. Let's transfer the excess green blend back to the folded sheet. You can see how this cycle goes, and that brings us to the last stage, which is static grass. Let's put the unfolded paper back underneath the terrain, and this time we are primarily targeting the grass area, so let's add glue to the grass area. Also, we're not blanketing the entire tile with static grass, and that's because when we set other tiles next to these, if they're not completely covered with grass, it won't blend. So do it kind of spotty, then whatever terrain you want to bring next to it, it'll match up nicely. You're going to want to let this glue dry and get solid before you dust off the piece. And that's because if you use a brush to start sweeping the piece, there's a very good chance you will get glue on the bristles of the brush. And if you start to brush the tile and get glue on the resin, unless that's your intention, that's not going to be fun to fix. I'd recommend dusting this off a day later. Just look at it. All the foliage and the colors of the rocks, the colored resin water effects, and the rocks under the surface of the water, it's amazing. And you know, it was really fast and easy to do. And you know what? We considered making these in 2" by 2" tiles. That would have been so much work because it takes 9 2" by 2" tiles to make one 6" by 6" tile. Act 4 has 37 6 by 6 water tiles. That's equal to 333 2" by 2" tiles. Can you imagine pouring resin for that many tiles? Sorry. Okay, so we wanted to share some thoughts with you. Jen and I were talking about what things we would consider doing in our next set. Aside from snow or lava, which is coming up, we thought about flocking and adding foliage to the grass tiles. So not even talking about the water tiles just yet, but adding grass and foliage to grass tiles, which you can go to our website and you can get for free. It's on the Act 1 page. Scroll down to the bottom. Anyhow, if we did that, meaning we added static grass and foliage all the way edge to edge on the grass tile, then what we could have did is added the foliage edge to edge on the dry surface side of the tile so that it would blend, right? And you would have this foliage and static grass thing going over continuous, and that would have looked really cool. And I know we talked about that earlier, saying why we wouldn't do it, but if you decided to do it and you wanted to take things like even further, you know, one level up, that would be a good option. We're just talking about the dry side. Now, that being said, if you want to raise the bar a little bit further, you could also add foliage and flock and static grass into the wet side underwater. And then when you poured your resin on the top of that, that might just look amazing. The other thing is, if you decided you didn't want to add water, you can easily get some clear nail polish and just, you know, paint in the water. It wouldn't be thick, but you know, you could still do it. And then later, if you decided, you know what, I want to add the resin, you know, a thick water layer in there, you could still do that. You can pour the resin later over the nail polish. So that's something else to think about. Anyhow, in the next video, we're going to show you how we created this Arctic looking set. It's amazing, so don't miss it. We have other movies we're working on. Aside from our product reviews and tutorials, we will be releasing more history and lore of Mystic Realm, Tomb of Creatures, which is a series about creatures we created for our world, and we are talking about creating theatrical stories. So if that's something you're interested in, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure to sign up for our website newsletter to be notified about limited time free product codes, new videos, file updates, and crowdfunding projects. We wish you good fortune in the adventures to come.